Is Helldivers 2 dying? No, probably not.
Let's talk about Helldivers 2 and the current state of this live service. The game launched to huge success, definitely Sony's most successful live service that they themselves have kind of published. Obviously,
And that they trying to ruin.
Bungie is now part of PlayStation, but Bungie was not a PlayStation entity before its acquisition. So Helldivers 2 represented a big deal for Sony and PlayStation, and currently the game, it's lost a significant portion of the player base, and that's not to say that this game is like tanking and, that it's going to fail or anything, but looking
Helldivers 2 has lost 90% of players since launch. Okay. Admittedly, losing 90% of players doesn't mean it's dead or that it's even that bad.
at numbers, it has lost roughly 90% of its player base, and their question
Yeah, look at that. Still, 45,000 people, 24-hour peak. That is great. That is good. Those are some solid numbers. A 90% player base reduction like this, not a big deal. It's actually really good because you can't expect Helldivers to survive for 100 years. No one's expecting that. Maybe Young is. Yeah, maybe Young actually is. Who knows?
as to whether this is a live service that can maintain itself for the long-term future. Now, looking at the numbers, like the fact that it's still getting, roughly 45,000 players every day, that's still like not bad at all. Obviously, a far cry from its initial all-time peak, 400.
The way he says this, it feels so wrong. It feels like he doesn't know what he's talking about at this point.
158,208 players, but this is by no means doom and gloom. But at the same time, a live service, the goal is usually to maintain a certain player base and see that kind of become a steady pace of players that eventually also kind of increases over time. There should be like an ebb and flow. When a live service starts to see a consistent trend of kind of the player base diminishing, there are some potential concerns as to whether it can maintain itself for not just months.
It has maintained itself for now. I don't see these ginormous issues.
On end, but years on end. And so questions are being raised about that. You look at something like, Destiny 2, which is one of the most successful live services out there, and in many cases, sort of the blueprint of what a live service looter shooter should be. You can see right here that it started at a peak of 292.
Does he even know how many Destiny 2 is dead videos that have been over the years? A lot. A lot. I have partaken in them, in fact.
1,000 players, and you can see how that's fluctuated up and down. But aside from like some really major dips here and there, like this recent dip into the 30,000s, you can see there's this nice ebb and flow that highlights that people are still coming back to this game. And in the last 30 days, with the launch of the final shape, I mean, that player base has utterly exploded. I believe we're seeing peak players almost peak again. The last time we saw it peak was all the way back in February of 2000 was it January? No, February of 2023 at over 316,000. We almost reached that number again with the launch of the latest expansion.
Yeah, they're expansions, Young. That's how they work. Helldivers still hasn't had an expansion. I feel that he's really grasping at straws here, or more likely completely nothing.
So that highlights just this level of consistency that showcases a live service that is alive and well and healthy, and that people will go back to if the content addition.
Wait. So, 100K people is fine, but 50, well, 45. Let's leave it at that. 100K people return. But here you can see, for example, May, the average was 72 players, then it was 60, then it was 30. Make it make sense.
Back to if the content additions are substantial, and people have been really happy with how the final shape turned out. So I guess the question is, what does the future hold for Helldivers 2? Because this is a game that has released consistent updates, but it feels like those updates, in terms of bringing players back in a significant way, hasn't moved the needle by a whole lot. And news outlet Forbes highlights here.
Yeah, it's true, but these updates are not to actually bring back lost players. Well, some of them kind of are, where they fix bugs that a lot of people didn't like and leave for. Yeah, sure. But these updates are to keep the player base entertained. This is like League of Legends or Dota changing balance every couple of weeks just so it feels fresh. This is what Helldivers is doing.
This article from Paul Tassi, some statistics that are worth looking at about the game, like the fact that it is routinely outside the top 10 list and is number 58 in top sellers on the service, specifically referring to Steam, which is what we have a lot of.
Wow, it's not the most played game in the universe. I guess it's a failure. Dude, these stakes
Of data on. And then when it comes to the game being streamed, the most viewed Twitch stream of the game at this moment has 56 viewers. The kind of social media and content creation.
Okay, Young, listen. Listen here, okay? You cannot wear whatever this shirt is and this under it because it looks like you're wearing a fucking sleeveless dress. Okay? You can't do that.
Creation kind of data also matters too, because that highlights how much people are interacting with the game and how much it's drawing eyes to this day, and those numbers are diminishing as well. Not to mention that there are some complaints surrounding the current state of the game. Again, it's not like the game is an utter failure or anything, or crashing and burning, but people do wish for certain things to improve. Players most recently have been complaining that higher levels were too punishing to be fun, but after a large-scale buff patch, it barely moved a needle. Not to mention that, like I said, certain updates.
Yeah, again, there is a difference between rolling out an expansion so players return and the graph goes like this, and updating the game constantly so people don't leave it in general. That is what Helldivers is doing. At some point, they're probably gonna drop an expansion, right? I would assume, because it is a smart thing to do, but still.
That feel pretty major have not caused a huge resurgence of players. There's been no significant surge other than a brief spike when a mass automaton invasion happened, but interest fell sharply after a week, and since then the game has continued to shed players quickly. And this is a live service. That's the main thing. If this were like a single player experience or even a multiplayer experience that has sort of a beginning, middle, and end and isn't meant to be played for years on end, then these statistics would be fairly normal. But this is
these statistics are already fairly normal. So there are 99.9% games out there that have multiplayer elements. Wish that they had the numbers Helldivers have. You understand that, right, Young? No, you don't, probably.
Game that is getting consistent updates, that a recurrent amount of money is being spent on by Sony and by Arrowhead, and so it requires a certain consistent amount of financial return every quarter and whatnot. And there's the question of, will this game have enough financial returns to justify its maintenance over the long term? As for why people...
Yeah, like literally everything that's online. Yeah. Man, the hot takes from Young currently are absolutely next level this video. Yeah, I completely feel he's just randomly grasping at straws here, and there's nothing really to say here. Yeah, it has lost 90% of the player base, but that's to be expected. No game doesn't do that.
People are potentially dropping out of this game currently. Well, Paul Tassi, again, he's the one who's been kind of covering this a lot. And looking at some of the comments, it's interesting to see what people are saying. Some people are theorizing that maybe Sony forcing the whole linking to a PlayStation account, that whole debacle that spread far and wide, that they eventually had to backpedal on, that might have contributed to...
Oh, that did contribute. I mean, you can literally compare the dates and see what happens. It did contribute.
A lot of players deciding to leave. Now,
I personally know people who played Helldivers too, and after the linking, even if it didn't affect their country, even if it didn't affect them and they never actually had to make the thing, they left. Yeah, it definitely affected a lot of things.
Tassie, and looking at Steam charts, it is highlighted that when you look at the day in which this whole debacle happened back in May of 2024, looking at the Steam data there, you can see that it didn't really impact the game a whole lot. It wasn't like we saw a huge crash of players around that period. You can see that the decline has been steady all throughout this controversial time period for the game. It definitely damaged the optics surrounding the title, but they, I guess, backpedaled on.
Not necessarily true, by the way. This is a false equivalency that a lot of people draw, by the way. I can't even fault Young for being uneducated in this case. He's a voice actor, okay? Give him some slack. Literally talentless. Anyway, the fact that you see a graph like this, and that thing happen here, and you can't say, oh, look at that, it's a 100% drop here. You can still probably see the drop if you look in it deeper, but that doesn't mean that you're just assuming that the graph should look like this. Okay, let me just give you an example of why that's the wrong way of looking at it. You see this dip right here? If you remove this optic right here, you would assume it would just move more like that and be even lower now. But that's not what happened. But if you only see this part of the graph right here, you probably think it's gonna dip like this. But it doesn't.
This controversial time period for the game. It definitely damaged the optics surrounding the title, but they, I guess, backpedaled on it quickly enough, though there are still restrictions when it comes to which countries can access the game. But in terms of a pure PR perspective, they did do enough damage control where this didn't impact the game's numbers tremendously. Others are saying that in terms of the kinds of activities and content you partake in with the game is starting to get a little stale after all these months. So somebody here said,
yes, obviously. Again, you cannot make a game that people are going to play forever. This I talked about this when we were talking about good games and bad games, and the huge difference between them. People are not even going to play a good game forever because it's the same game. You're playing the same game over and over again. Even if it's good, at some point, people are going to leave the good game because they have played enough of it. Even if it's still good. I was playing Lost Ark. I liked the game. I liked it a lot. But I quit it anyway, even though I liked it. Because I just played a lot of it. And I was tired of doing dailies. Now they fixed the dailies. Guess what? I'm not back. You can't always just fix something and get all the people who left because of it to come back. You can't expect people to keep playing your game even if it's good for forever. Fortnite is still one of the most massive games in the world, but it's nowhere near its all-time peak of existence. That's because even if it's a good game for Zoomers and whatnot, they're still gonna get bored of it as time passes.
love the game, but it's still fighting bots and bugs on nearly the same planets with slightly different guns. I love the game, but for a live service, it's too shallow. Once I maxed out every ship upgrade, I had nothing to work towards. And that's kind of the general feedback I'm seeing. It's like there's an incredible foundation here. It just, as a live service, it needs to be more developed. It just needs significant more content additions. And
it needs more endgame.
And, you know, it's been getting some cool content here and there, but we're not talking about, like, expansion scale levels of content and campaign experiences and modes and stuff like that. And so I'm curious as to what's being worked on behind the scenes for Helldivers 2 to maintain its live service.
I do think there's going to be an expansion. It's just the easiest thing to do, probably. But they can't really fail it with bad mechanics or whatever. But they do need an expansion. The big event is obviously going to be when the third faction is going to show up, and that's going to be a good push for people to come out, because it's going to be Probably new planets, probably new locations, probably new objectives, probably, well, not probably, but 100% new enemies and whatnot.
I really do think that Helldivers 2 does need like an expansion level of an update. It's why Warframe, for example, has continued to rise in its status and player base numbers. Every time they release a major content for Warframe, it feels like they basically add a whole new game mode. It's just the additions are so substantial that it feels like a complete.
I have heard this take before, and since Young, yeah, doesn't play Warframe as much as I know, I'm pretty sure he's just parroting this opinion from I have heard the exact same opinion in another video. I can't remember which one is it, but it's a really popular one.
Completely fresh game all over again. It's like a fresh new addition on top of all of the good things that came before. And I think if Helldivers 2 can do that, I think there's still a chance for this game to come back because, again, the foundations are solid enough that
the game's not even close to dead. It's still popular. People still talk about it. But it needs to make a comeback. Okay, Young. Okay, relax, Chief. Okay, I think it's time, boys.
right here
Right
on
here,
Young
yeah.
I'll see you guys next
Young
time.
yeah. Young
yeah.
Woo! Yeah, look at that smile. You gotta love Young yeah. He's just, you know, Helldivers lose 90% of the player base. That's a good title. Hey, I'm gonna use the same title. What do you mean? Of course I am. Anyway, bye-bye.